What was shocking in the results was that this year, about 54%, just over half of those 11,000 school leaders are saying the school they're working in is going to have a deficit budget. That's where that you're basically the budget you've got at the moment is you haven't got enough money, resources to pay by the end of the year. And by the end of next year, by 2023-24, that will be up to 95%, unless the government puts some more money in. 95% of the school leaders that respond to our survey are saying that their school is going to be in a deficit budget position, which is huge. Schools aren't legally allowed to go into a deficit budget position. They have to do something about that. They have to make some sort of changes to what they're doing in order to prevent themselves from going into a deficit position.
What do you think about the fact that a head teacher started a petition to the government urging them, to fund schools properly and and encourage other members of the profession to speak up? Because a lot of members, as I understand it, they don't want to speak publicly. They speak privately about the problems, but they don't want to speak publicly. The fact that somebody started a petition and it's got to this kind of level of frustration, what's your thoughts about that?
I think school leaders are desperate at the moment, and they are using anything that they can do in their power to raise awareness about this issue. Like Steve has started a petition. Steve Hitchcock, who's a head teacher in Devon, is finding the position so desperate for him that he started an online petition. But we've got more and more school leaders that are speaking out, taking part in surveys, and want to do something because they do not want to start making the cuts that we are going to have to make if we are going to try and balance the budget. If the government in the mini budget next week does not give schools more money, then schools are going to have to make cuts. And those cuts are likely to fall on the number of people we have in school, on possibly teaching assistants. 66% of the respondents to our survey are saying they are going to reduce the number or the hours of teaching assistants in school. 50% are going to look at teachers. Now, these are in teaching assistants. These are the people that provide in-class support for children with special educational needs and for all children, maybe pastoral support, looking after children's mental health, perhaps, and maybe doing some things with them when family breakups, sort of pastoral stuff. Teachers that might be lost from the system are those that perhaps provide specialist support. But we might end up with a situation where we've got less people working in schools, and that's going to put more pressure onto the teachers, the teaching assistants and the school leaders who are working in the system, who are already have very high levels of workload. So we are looking at a real crisis in the system, and this is why some school leaders are getting desperate. They do not want to cut posts because they know that will erode the quality of what they are doing with pupils. And many school leaders have spent years training people, developing people, employing people in order to provide a quality education. But now they are going to have to possibly lose some of those very people that they've invested money, time and other resources in. And it's just that's causing people to just do anything, including starting online petitions, talking to the media, to get the message to their local MPs and to government itself that they need to do something about funding of schools.
What kind of impacts on pupils are you seeing now? What are the realistic impacts of further cuts down the line?
Schools have been very good at protecting pupils from the cuts that have been made in education. Actually, since 2010, schools have seen cuts of about 9% over that time. But we've been just working harder in the system to make sure that children are still supported as much as we can by just the people in the system working harder. The danger now is the level of cuts that are going to have to be made are not cutting away fat anymore in the system. We've spent 12 years, some of that in austerity budgets, in making schools run very lean and efficiently. We are now talking about cutting into the bone, if you like, cutting into the structures that are there. And that will mean if there are less people in the classroom, there are less people to support children in their well-being and in their learning. And that is going to have a detrimental effect on those children's education. It's also going to increase the workload for hardworking teachers and school leaders who are in the system, who I know at the moment are already doing more than they ever have done for less money than they've ever had to do it on. This is another issue creeping into the system. Although teachers this year are getting a 5% pay increase, that is well below inflation. And over the last since 2010, pay of the teaching profession in real terms has fallen by 20% for class teachers and 24% for school leaders. So people are going to have to be working harder for less money. And that means we're going to lose experienced people from the system as they go off to work in other industries that pay better and the conditions are better as well.
Obviously, there's a potential strike on the cards, and this isn't taken lightly, is it? There's a real frustration here.
The teaching unions and soon the NEHT, the union that I'm the president of, are going to be balloting their members over industrial action, principally around the pay, because that is all we're legally allowed to do under the law is to take industrial action over our terms and conditions. But alongside of that is the funding for that pay. If we want more pay, the government will have to put more money into the system to meet those pay demands and to also make sure that we keep the good people in it. But this is important to everyone working in education, which is why it's the first time that all the teaching unions and the NEHT are conducting a national ballot, because we all know that we are going to be in the circumstances where we can't recruit people. In the last 9 years, eight of those years, we've missed the national recruitment targets for new teachers coming into the system, and we're finding that older teachers or experienced teachers are leaving sooner than ever before. 1 in 3 teachers is planning to leave in the next few years unless the pay gets better. So the government have got a real problem that they need to think about solving. They need to pay staff better. And that's why we're all balloting at the moment. So there might be industrial action if the government don't think about the pay and the funding that goes with that, so that schools are able to pay people better, it is also needed. So it's a real crisis time, and that it's happening now. This isn't a prediction. This is happening in schools now. We are losing people, and we are having to make savings that are damaging children's education.